新加坡的总理黄循财接受印媒的采访，说将竭尽全力帮助印度的发展。这个视频有点长啊，大家仔细看一下，我相信能收获很多东西。
Tomorrow, not to prejudge, but what do you think are going to be some of the major takeaways or key outcomes from your discussions?
There will be a lot to discuss, and one of the key items that the officials have been planning for, is for both leaders, both of us, to announce a roadmap for the CSP, for the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. Last year, we talked about upgrading it. This year, we want to have clarity around what the CSP means. So we will have a roadmap, an ambitious roadmap, setting out all the different areas of cooperation and how we want to pursue them further, the different pillars. And this will give clear direction and vision for the next phase of India-Singapore relations. And there's a lot to talk about. For example, on economic cooperation, we have very close cooperation, and we're discussing how we can bring it together even closer in areas like semiconductors and industrial parks, which India is pursuing. In the areas of skills development, we are supporting India's National Center of Excellence for Skills. In the area of connectivity, be it in maritime, air, or digital connectivity, a lot of cooperation which we are pursuing too. And we are also discussing new areas of cooperation. For example, in space, where India has tremendous strengths, and we have had Singapore low-orbit satellites being launched right here in India. And again, it's an area where we think there is a potential for us to do more together. So it's going to be a full agenda in our discussions, and I'm looking forward to having that discussion with Prime Minister Modi to see how we can crystallize and take further all of these different areas of cooperation. It's also quite remarkable if you think about it. The last time when Prime Minister Modi and I met, it was last year. That was his first meeting. He had just had his election. Soon after he entered his third term, he visited Singapore. Now, a year later, soon after my election, I am visiting India. It's almost precisely exactly to the same date, 1 year later. And within that short period of time, a lot of that cooperation has continued to advance further. And that's what the India-Singapore cooperation is based on, not just on words and rhetoric, but also on concrete action and outcomes. And I believe in this very turbulent world that we are in, the bilateral relationship between our two countries has become more important than ever.
You mentioned semiconductors and skilling. I was wondering if you could throw some light on, what is the progress that has been made. Clearly, Singapore wants to, help India create a semiconductor hub. You want to upskill people. Why is it important for Singapore to see India, moving up the semiconductor value chain?
We have made good progress in this area of cooperation. It was something that Prime Minister Modi raised with me when he visited Singapore last year. Since then, we've signed an MOU, and we've made progress across 3 different areas. One, in having a green lane for semiconductor goods, because the semiconductor industry is not just about making the chips. You need raw materials, you need equipment, you need suppliers. So we are trying to bring the 2 ecosystems closer together through a green lane that will facilitate exchange and will align best practices and standards. That's very important. Second, in skills development, because with semiconductors you need skilled technicians and workers. So we are supporting India's development of skills in this area, including discussing the potential of doing a joint skills training center in Gujarat for semiconductors. And thirdly, in collaboration around research and innovation, where we have some strengths and we think India potentially can do a lot more, and we will see how we can work together in these areas too. Why is Singapore interested in all of these? Well, I offer you 3 reasons. First, semiconductors are important in today's economy. You need chips to propel the digital economy forward. And given the strategic importance of semiconductors, we do want in the world a more diversified and resilient supply chain. And India can contribute to this. Second, we have companies in Singapore that are interested in the opportunities that India offers. Many of the semiconductor players in Singapore are leading global companies. They make their own decisions. But we do have Singapore suppliers that are part of that semiconductor ecosystem. And they are very keen to see how they can come to India and forge links with Indian players and have opportunities here to grow their business. And that's why even when India now is having a Semicon event, we have a large contingent of Singapore businesses participating in India's Semicon event, because they hope to forge closer links and seize the opportunities that India offers. Thirdly, I would say a strong and rising India contributes to stability, resilience, and shared prosperity in Asia. And that opens up new opportunities, not just for India itself, but for its partners around the region. And that's why we are keen to see how we in Singapore can play a part in supporting India's development in this industry.
Sure. You mentioned the geopolitical circumstances. I think they have changed tremendously.
Yes.
Even every week they seem to be changing.
Every day you've got something new coming up from the news.
So in these circumstances, is India still a safe bet for Singaporean investors? Because you are probably the largest investor in India. And what are your plans for investments going forward in India?
With investments, they are never a safe bet. If you want a safe bet, then you don't make any money. You must take risk. And there will always be short-term volatility with investments, but we try to take a long-term perspective. And from that point of view, we are optimistic about India's growth prospects because of your young population, your rising middle class, your dynamic tech sector, and importantly, a government that's committed to reforms. Our confidence in India is not new. It's not a recent thing. It's long-standing, and it's backed by proven track record and actions. We had a CECA agreement 20 years ago, and now since then, our trade has grown by 2.5 times. And as you said just now, Singapore is the largest investor in India, I think for 7 consecutive years now. So we will continue to invest in India. We will continue to have confidence in India's prospects for the future. As to what industries and what areas, well, we have to leave it to the private sector. The government itself is not investing, but we set the conditions, we set the framework, we provide the overall environment for businesses and investors to come together. And I think there will be many opportunities opening up. From what we understand when we engage businesses and investors in Singapore, there's a lot of interest. For example, in areas like hospitality, advanced manufacturing, sustainability, logistics. So these are all areas potentially where we can see more investment flows coming into India from Singapore.
How are you looking at India, to help Singapore in green energy, which is now the new thing, and especially for climate mitigation? And is there any interest in also working with India for food security?
We have an interest for both. For green energy, we are doing our part to accelerate Singapore's decarbonization journey. It's more difficult for Singapore, I think, compared to many other countries because of our constraints. We are a city-state, we don't have a lot of land, we don't have access to renewable energy at scale. So the decarbonization journey for Singapore will inevitably consist of a portfolio of solutions, no single solution, but a mix of different options for us, including importing green energy from around us, from our neighbors, which we are working on in ASEAN, but possibly low carbon hydrogen. It could include carbon capture, or carbon credits, for example. And we are also exploring the possibility of other options, including civilian nuclear power.
SMRs, maybe?
Possibly. We are trying to build up capabilities to understand the technology better because we do see new technologies, be it SMR, or even further out into the future, fusion, nuclear fusion, which are safer and could potentially be deployed even in a small city-state like Singapore. So we are just at the stage of building up capabilities to understand these possibilities. So we are working on all of these options. And again, it's an area where we would very much be interested in working closely with India to strengthen our links and collaboration across the range of different options on energy security and on the transition to a low carbon economy. For food security and for food trade, we already have very close links. Where food is concerned, we are trying to do some domestic production, but it will be very limited given where Singapore is. So the reality is we will always be importing most of what we eat in Singapore. So our food security strategy is one of diversification. And there, again, we see India as a potential source. We already import a lot of rice from India. A lot of spices come from India. And our agencies are continuing to engage one another. We've discussed this, the ministers discussed this at the RSMR, how we can facilitate more trade, how we can have more exchanges amongst the agencies where food safety and regulatory standards are concerned. And we will continue to welcome more food imports from India as a way to diversify our food sources and enhance our food security.
One of the first places where India, tied up for real-time digital payments was with Singapore.
Yes, the UPI PayNow linkage, which has been very successful.
Yes, and where do you see the digitalization journey going? What are we going to do next? Or what is the next step that you're going to take?
This is one area where we believe there is potential to do more. We started with the UPI PayNow linkage, and already it's expanded to more financial institutions and banks. I think it's been very effective for both sides. We can see how we can be more interoperable with this payments linkage. We have also done digital linkage in other areas like digital documentation for shipping and trade. So that helps with a more seamless business process. Our central banks are talking about digital assets and how we can collaborate more. So these are all potential areas to do more together. But more fundamentally, I would say there is scope for us to think about having a more seamless cross-border data exchange between our two countries. Because data is what underpins a lot of the activities for finance and for the digital economy. And you need that ability to exchange data more seamlessly. So we are exploring the possibility of a pilot cross-border data corridor between India, potentially in Gift City, and Singapore. And if we can get that going, I think that will potentially allow us to, from the pilot, understand what are the parameters, what are the concerns that both sides may have.
It's just the digital sandbox that people have been talking about.
That's right. So we are thinking of it through a regulatory sandbox, which we can start exploring. And that can help take things forward. So that's something that the ministers had discussed at the ISMR, and we are hopeful that we can advance this particular pilot and regulatory sandbox idea. Beyond the data itself, then you can start talking about how we can collaborate in other areas, including in capital markets, for example, and expanding our cooperation there. So the nexus between data and fintech it's very close, a very, very close nexus. And I think there is a lot of potential for us to do more in this space. Another related area in the digital space is AI, artificial intelligence, where again it's underpinned by data, but also on top of that data infrastructure, you have a lot of new applications and new technologies. And that's also an area where the ministers had some discussions, and we hope to see closer collaboration.
Possibly on AI hubs?
Possibly, a whole range of possibilities beyond, because with AI you need the data infrastructure, then the data link becomes important, but on top of that you have your models, you have your applications, you have industry-specific models too, and applications.
And trust.
And trust, you've got to think about safety, responsible use of AI, you've got to think about research and new frontiers for artificial intelligence. All of these are potential for us to collaborate on.
Singapore has possibly been one of the strongest votaries of a closer relationship between ASEAN and India. India has, of course, been asking in recent months for a review of the ATIGA, the Trade in Goods Agreement. What are Singapore's views on that? I mean, the Indian side feels the process has gone on for too long, And what do you think can be done more to drive trade between India and ASEAN?
We believe the ASEAN-India relationship is a very important and critical one. These are long-standing ties, civilizational ties, grounded on trade and cultural exchanges over a long period of time. And within that context, the ATIGA is an important part of this overall relationship. So the review is ongoing. We understand India's concerns. We hope there will be flexibility on the part of the officials that are in the midst of the discussions so that they can reach a mutually acceptable outcome for all parties. Because we want that trade to continue flowing. We want to have closer ties between ASEAN and India. And quite besides just trade in goods, I think we can forge closer ties in other areas too. Connectivity, services, in digital connectivity. ASEAN is trying to integrate our economies of ASEAN with a digital economy agreement. And if we can do that together with India, I think that would be potentially yield a lot of new opportunities. ASEAN is trying to connect ourselves with an ASEAN power grid and to link ourselves up more in terms of sustainability and green energy. And again, there's potential for us to do more with India. At the strategic level, the ASEAN-India ties are of critical importance because the center of gravity of the global economy will over time shift toward Asia. Within Asia, we already have China as one growth engine. India will be the second growth engine, there's no doubt. We think that ASEAN can be the third. And combined, these growth engines will contribute to the stability, resilience, and continued prosperity of Asia. So it's within that context that there is a strategic imperative for closer ASEAN-India ties. And we want to encourage India to continue with its Act East policy. And Singapore will do our part to facilitate these closer links between India and ASEAN.
You are here at a very interesting time when India and China are kind of rebuilding their relations. And then we have had the trade tensions that are going on. I mean, India, US, US-China. How do you look at these pulls and pressures? And how can India and Singapore work together to kind of address all the uncertainty that we are seeing?
The world is indeed going through profound changes. The two largest superpowers, America and China, have a critical relationship, and it's a relationship that will be the most consequential relationship in the world. The two economies are deeply intertwined. So any attempts at a full decoupling between the two will be highly damaging and destabilizing. It's not going to be cost-free at all. Even a trade war between the two will damage the two economies and will send shockwaves across the global economy. So while the America-China relationship is no longer the same as before, it will be characterized by intense competition and rivalry, there is still a need for dialogue and engagement. And I'm glad both sides are talking. And I hope they will find ways to put guardrails around the relationship and find ways to manage their differences and eventually land on a good outcome. Likewise, we hope that America and India will be able to continue their engagement and dialogue and find ways to address some of the issues that have emerged more recently. Singapore watches all these with great concern. I mean, there's not much we can do when it comes to US, China, US, India. But we watch with great concern because we are a small and open economy, very reliant on external demand. And all of these global uncertainties, the additional barriers to global trade, will impact on external demand and will have an impact on our small economy. So we are concerned about the developments. We will try to do our part to facilitate discussions and engagement and dialogue where possible. But the one thing we can do proactively is to work with like-minded countries. Work with like-minded countries to foster closer links, to operate on the basis of a rules-based trading framework, to bring our economies closer together and to find win-win outcomes. And we believe we can do so with India because we have with India a strategic partnership built on 60 years of friendship and trust. So in this very uncertain world, there is all the more reason for us to double down on this very critical India-Singapore relationship, and I certainly look forward to doing so with Prime Minister Modi.
Thank you so much for your time and for a very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
新加坡这个国家原来是以华人为主的，有70%多都是华人，但是没想到呢，他们这么支持印度人啊！新加坡的印度人越来越多了。大家看一下，今年跨年的时候，新加坡的印度人有多少？新加坡这个国家原来是美国体系的一部分，他们守着马六甲海峡已经发财几十年了。咱们国家是世界第一贸易大国，因为咱们国家的货物经过马六甲海峡太多了，所以咱们国家必须得有备选方案。海南岛封关就是备选方案之一。像印尼跟咱们国家的海南岛实现直航了，这样的话到新加坡的货轮啊就少了，并且印尼的货物在海南岛加工以后再到咱们内地可以免税啊，这都是一个很大的优惠。另外就是随着咱们国家工程技术的提高，国力越来越强，咱们国家肯定会在泰国呀，或者说其他的地方再搞一个新加坡马六甲海峡的备份。咱们作为世界第一贸易大国，不可能让任何一个国家卡住咱们的脖子的。所以无论是咱们国家的海南岛，还是泰国的运河，还有巴基斯坦的港口，这都是咱们的备份之一。包括一带一路的陆运，还有将来的北极航线，以及未来连通东南亚的这个高铁啊，都是咱们国家的备选方案之一。 我再强调一遍，咱们国家作为世界第一贸易大国，是不可能让任何国家或者说任何一个水路来卡住咱们的。就因为咱们国家在不停的找备份，所以这就动了新加坡的利益，他们就拉着美国引进印度人。但是我敢肯定的说，新加坡最后必然失败。咱们国家收复台湾以后，整个东南亚就是咱们的基本盘，所以他们的总理和政府高官对咱们阴阳怪气的。现在他要全力支持印度的发展了，就让他支持去吧。把话撂这儿啊，最后新加坡必输。好吧，今天就跟大家聊这么多，有不同意见咱们评论区讨论，请大家点点关注。好嘞，谢谢。